The alien emperor, Azrazel, presided over yet another session focused on humanity's unexpected resilience. His many advisors, assembled in semicircles around him, were growing weary of Earth's refusal to submit to galactic dominance. Humans, they thought, were merely a young race, insignificant in power or influence. Yet their recent expansions and fierce resistance hinted otherwise. Azrazel's patience had finally worn thin. "It's time to show them what it means to defy us," he declared, his voice echoing across the chamber. The council members murmured their approval, but a few exchanged nervous glances. For years, they had clashed with Earth over resources and boundaries, but outright threats had never been enforced. Azrazel's plan, however, crossed a line that would forever change their perception of humanity's resilience. Among the Council's intelligence network, Azrazel had identified a human child, only 10 years old, son of General Anthony Marshall. Known for his strategic genius and fierce loyalty, Marshall was the most respected military figure on Earth. His name alone sent shivers down the spines of his enemies. Taking his son, however, was a step beyond mere punishment. It was an assault on Marshall's legacy, a calculated blow meant to shake Earth to its core. Azrazel believed it would show humanity that resistance was futile. The following day, in a cold, calculated broadcast transmitted across both human and alien space, the Council executed the child in front of billions. The image of young Ethan Marshall, barely understanding the fate imposed upon him, ignited a storm on Earth and beyond. The galactic world watched in shocked silence, aware that this moment would not be forgotten. When the news reached General Anthony Marshall, he stood alone in his war room, watching the broadcast as it flickered on his screen. Marshall's face was impassive, every inch the composed leader who had faced down countless battles and impossible odds. Yet something in his eyes shifted, a transformation so subtle yet profound that those who knew him would have stepped back in fear. Ethan had been his only son, the embodiment of his hopes, his dreams, and the legacy he had spent a lifetime forging. Marshall's top advisors, sensing the weight of the tragedy, filed into the room, each man uncertain how to address him. Colonel James Turner, his oldest friend and second in command, took a step forward, his voice thick with grief. "Anthony, this is an act of war. Azrazel doesn't realize the fury he's unleashed." Marshall said nothing at first, his eyes still locked on the screen. Slowly, he turned to his men, his voice low but steady. "They wanted a response. They'll have it." The statement was simple, yet it resonated with a chilling clarity. Earth's response would not be diplomatic, nor would it be restrained. Marshall's rage was not the kind that burned hot and faded. It was a cold, calculated resolve that promised total retribution. In the days that followed, the story spread across Earth and its colonies, igniting a firestorm of anger. Humanity, unified by grief and fury, demanded justice. Civilian protests erupted. Leaders issued condemnations, and even some alien allies voiced their disgust. Azrazel, in his arrogance, had united humanity in a way no enemy had before. The Galactic Council began to hear rumors of Earth's leaders convening an emergency summit, and the faintest whisper of anxiety crept into the council chambers. Meanwhile, Marshall's preparations were swift and absolute. In private meetings with Earth's military elite, he outlined a strategy of retaliation that few could comprehend in scope. His gaze was unflinching, his voice filled with the weight of a father's loss and a soldier's determination. He instructed his team to assemble Earth's most elite forces, the very best humanity had to offer. In his mind, the objective was clear. Azrazel would pay, and the Council would never again question humanity's strength. Still, Marshall held his cards close, saying little of his intentions beyond those who needed to know. Earth's leaders supported him unconditionally, realizing that this was not merely a personal vendetta, but a testament to their species' right to exist without fear. In their grief and anger, they placed their unwavering trust in General Marshall, knowing that he would guide them through the darkness. But Marshall was aware of the stakes. His son's death was not only a wound to his heart, but an open scar on the soul of humanity. Azrazel's attack was a challenge to everything Earth represented, and Marshall vowed to respond with a vengeance so fierce that the Council would regret their arrogance. As humanity braced itself, whispers of their preparations began to reach the Galactic Council. Azrazel laughed them off, convinced that no human force could match the might of his empire. But beneath the Emperor's bravado, unease lingered. He had underestimated humans before, dismissing them as insignificant. Now, that same dismissal could be his undoing. In the quiet of his office, after all the generals had left, Marshall finally allowed himself a moment to grieve. He removed his insignia, placing it on his desk beside a small photograph of his son. For a single moment, his stoic facade slipped, and his shoulders sagged under the weight of his loss. But as he straightened, his eyes hardened once more, fueled by the memory of his son's innocent smile and the promise he made to himself. They would come to fear humanity, and they would learn never to underestimate it again. The tension in Earth's War Command was palpable as General Anthony Marshall took his position at the center of the briefing room. His expression was resolute, his demeanor colder than anyone had seen before. Officers, intelligence analysts, and tactical commanders, men who had served him for years, fell silent, waiting for his words. They were well aware of the task at hand, to deliver a response that would make the Galactic Council, and especially Emperor Azrazel, tremble. "Gentlemen," Marshall began, his voice as sharp as steel, "we are about to initiate an operation that will leave an indelible mark on the galaxy. We're not here to make a statement. We're here to ensure that no one dares to harm humanity again." Colonel James Turner, his trusted right hand, studied Marshall intently. He had known the general through countless battles, but the intensity in Marshall's gaze was something new, an unbreakable determination forged in grief and fury. Turner knew that this mission was as much personal as it was strategic, and he was ready to follow Marshall to the bitter end. Marshall's strategy was as brilliant as it was ruthless. He outlined a complex, multi-pronged assault that would capitalize on every resource, every soldier, and every weapon Earth had to offer. The plan was ambitious. First, to disable the Galactic Council's vast network of defenses, then to launch a direct strike on their stronghold. Azrazel's empire relied on his tightly woven web of planetary shields, automated drone fleets, and communication relays, a fortress that had been regarded as impregnable. But Marshall was determined to prove otherwise. The room erupted in hushed murmurs as he presented the tactical layout. Earth's military hadn't attempted an assault of this magnitude before. Some men shifted uncomfortably, understanding the risks involved, but none spoke against it. They had all seen the broadcast of young Ethan's execution. They knew why they were here. Marshall continued with unwavering confidence. "We'll need our best operatives, men trained to execute with precision. No mistakes, no hesitation." He called forward Lieutenant Samuel Grant, a master strategist renowned for his work in stealth and infiltration, and Commander David Knox, a formidable field leader whose courage in hostile territory was unmatched. Both men nodded, their expressions mirroring the resolve of their leader. The general then brought up the fleet divisions. The Vanguard Corps, Earth's most advanced space fleet, was to lead the initial assault. Their goal: to breach the Council's defenses, distract their patrol forces, and weaken Azrazel's stronghold. Commanded by Admiral Leon Blackwell, a shrewd tactician with a history of relentless success, the Vanguard Corps was Earth's pride. Blackwell's face was stoic, and he simply nodded his agreement. He'd been preparing for this moment since the day he saw the Emperor's brutal display. Behind the fleet would be Earth's elite ground troops, the Iron Wolves, renowned for their skill and resilience under impossible conditions. These soldiers had been trained to operate in hostile alien environments and to counter advanced extraterrestrial tech. Their commander, Major Eric Draven, was a formidable warrior whose reputation struck fear into the hearts of Earth's enemies. He locked eyes with Marshall, his gaze unwavering. "We won't stop until the Emperor falls," he promised, his voice like iron. Marshall nodded. He trusted these men with his life and his mission. They, in turn, knew that their general was prepared to lead them through the darkest reaches of the galaxy if it meant securing justice. Each of them had their reasons for fighting. But now, bound by a common loss, they were united as never before. Before dismissing the group, Marshall paused, his voice lowering. This is more than revenge. The Emperor has violated a line that no being should cross. Humanity will not be coward, and we will not be prey. We'll show the galaxy that we are capable of protecting our own, whatever the cost. He activated a holographic screen that displayed the strike routes and locations, each one meticulously calculated to strike at the heart of Azrazel's defenses. They would launch in stagger formations to minimize detection, hit critical points simultaneously, and cripple the Council's capacity to retaliate. The plan was precise, relentless, and designed to leave no room for error. Marshall watched as his officers absorbed the plan, eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and fierce loyalty. The gravity of the task did not deter them. If anything, it emboldened them. Each man was aware of the risk, yet their loyalty to Marshall and their desire for retribution overrode their doubts. As the briefing concluded, Marshall stepped aside to confer privately with Colonel Turner. "There's no room for compromise," Marshall said quietly. "If Azrazel has any remaining forces, he'll rally them against us. We need to eliminate his power at the root." Turner nodded, his voice firm. "We're with you, sir. Every man here knows what's at stake. We're ready." Marshall allowed himself a single, rare moment of appreciation for his men. These soldiers were his brothers in arms, each willing to risk everything to deliver a blow that would echo across the galaxy. They knew that beyond this mission lay either victory or the complete devastation of everything they held dear. But they were undeterred. "Then let's make sure he remembers this day," Marshall said, his tone carrying the weight of a promise. "Let's make sure they all do." With that, he dismissed his officers, each man departing with a renewed sense of purpose. As they left the briefing room, a quiet determination settled over them. The mission was set, the target clear. They knew their roles, their objectives, and the depth of their resolve. This wasn't just about vengeance for a child lost. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never again be a pawn. Marshall watched them go, his mind already turning to the next step. The die had been cast, and there was no turning back. Soon, the galaxy would understand the price of crossing humanity. The star-studded darkness of space erupted in brilliant flashes as Earth's vanguard corps surged through the final defenses of the Galactic Council's stronghold. Led by Admiral Leon Blackwell, the fleet maneuvered with lethal precision, evading and destroying automated drone swarms and turret arrays designed to repel even the fiercest of attackers. But these defenses, formidable as they were, had never anticipated the sheer intensity of Earth's assault. Blackwell, calm and focused, issued commands with practiced authority. Group Alpha, engage the main barrier. Group Bravo, prepare to advance on the signal. Each squad moved like pieces on a chessboard, weaving between blasts of alien weaponry, chipping away at the Council's once impenetrable shield network. The Council's defenders had believed this day would never come, that Earth was a distant, minor power. Now, watching their defenses crumble under Blackwell's fleet, panic rippled through their ranks. Within the lead ship, Blackwell's eyes narrowed as he received the signal he'd been awaiting. "The Iron Wolves are in position, sir," reported his lieutenant. Blackwell gave a curt nod. "Tell Major Draven to proceed. We've got their backs." On the ground below, Major Eric Draven and his elite Iron Wolves forces were ready. Dropping from orbit in reinforced pods, the Wolves landed in precise formation, their weapons primed and calibrated for maximum devastation. They emerged onto the alien soil, fortified by advanced exoskeletons and plasma rifles tuned to punch through alien armor. Their visors glowed with heads-up displays streaming vital data on enemy positions, and Draven's orders came with the urgency of a man who knew failure was not an option. "Wolves, Draven barked through the comms. Our objective is the council chamber. The Emperor and his inner circle are inside. No one escapes. As the wolves stormed forward, alien soldiers scrambled to mount a defense, but it was clear they were outmatched. Draven's men cut through resistance with ruthless efficiency, moving as a single, deadly unit. The once imposing alien guards faltered under the onslaught, their superior numbers rendered meaningless against the wolves' unbreakable resolve and advanced weaponry. Humanity's vengeance had arrived. Draven pushed forward, his gaze set on the towering council building, its ominous architecture reflecting the arrogance of those who had ordered a human child's execution. The thought steeled his resolve further. This was no ordinary battle. It was justice, a reckoning. He tightened his grip on his weapon, charging onward as his men covered every angle, eliminating targets with relentless focus. Inside the council chamber, Emperor Azrazel's confidence was beginning to waver. He watched the assault unfold on the vast screen before him, his advisors frantically reporting the failure of defenses, the disintegration of shields, the collapse of the troops he'd considered invincible. Panic flared in his eyes, a flicker of emotion he'd long concealed beneath his despotic exterior. He had dismissed humans as primitive, inconsequential. Now, he could no longer ignore the reality. They were here, and they would not be stopped. "Emperor, we must retreat," urged one of his advisors, desperation creeping into his voice. "They will breach the chamber any moment now." Azrazel silenced him with a glare. "No," he growled. "I will not flee like a coward. They want revenge, but they won't have the satisfaction." Yet, the council members around him shifted uneasily, sensing their emperor's fear. They had never seen such unwavering resolve, such a direct assault on their own seat of power. The Galactic Council, rulers of 1,000 worlds, was now at the mercy of humanity's wrath. Outside the chamber, Draven's team breached the final defense line, their weapons blazing. As they stormed into the council's inner sanctum, alien guards fell back, overwhelmed by the wolves' relentless precision. Draven led the charge, his steps unwavering as he advanced towards the Emperor's throne. "Azrazel," he shouted, his voice echoing through the grand hall. "Face us and answer for what you've done." The Emperor rose, attempting to summon the last vestiges of his arrogance. But before he could speak, another figure stepped into the chamber, General Anthony Marshall, his presence like a storm sweeping through the room. Clad in his combat gear, Marshall's eyes were fixed solely on the Emperor. His soldiers stepped aside, giving him space, aware that this moment belonged to him alone. Azrazel tried to sneer, but the fear in his eyes betrayed him. "You think you can defy the council, Marshal," he spat, attempting to maintain a facade of authority. "Your defiance will be your undoing." Marshall approached slowly, every step deliberate. "You took my son," he said, his voice as cold as the void of space. "You thought you could break us, but all you've done is seal your fate." Without warning, Azrazel lunged, drawing a concealed blade with surprising speed. But Marshall was ready. In a swift motion, he disarmed the Emperor, pinning him to the floor. The once mighty ruler now lay beneath the human general, defeated, his arrogance shattered. Marshall looked down at him, his expression a mixture of grief and determination. "For Ethan," he whispered, his voice laced with the weight of his son's memory. With one final, decisive motion, Marshall ended Azrazel's reign, ensuring that the Emperor would never again wield power over another innocent life. As silence settled over the council chamber, the remaining members stared, stunned and powerless. They had witnessed the fall of their leader, and with him, the fall of their own unquestioned authority. Humanity had come not just to deliver justice, but to remind the galaxy of the cost of underestimating them. Marshall stood over the fallen Emperor, his gaze sweeping across the silent council. "Let this be a warning," he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. "If you dare to harm humanity again, we will come for you. Every last one of you." He turned to his men, his resolve unbroken. "Mission complete. Let's return home." And as they exited the Council's once impervious fortress, they left behind a shattered regime, their victory a testament to humanity's strength, and a promise that they would not be wronged again. The warships returned to Earth in a somber yet victorious procession, their hulls scarred but gleaming with pride. Crowds gathered to welcome the heroes, cheering as the soldiers disembarked. General Anthony Marshall, flanked by his officers, stepped onto the landing platform, his gaze steady and unyielding, though a deep sorrow remained behind his eyes. Victory had been achieved, yet it had come at a price he would carry forever. As Marshall walked toward the gathered crowd, he was met by the Secretary of Defense, who offered a respectful nod. "General," he said, his voice filled with admiration, "you've done what many thought was impossible. The Council's stronghold is shattered, and the galaxy now knows the strength of humanity." Marshall acknowledged the words with a tight nod, his thoughts briefly drifting to his son Ethan. He could almost feel his presence here among the celebrating crowd, as if his spirit had guided them all toward this hard-won peace. For Marshall, this wasn't merely a victory for Earth. It was a legacy for his son, a reminder to the galaxy that humanity would protect its own with unmatched resolve. Word of humanity's retaliation had already spread across the stars. Empires and factions that once saw Earth as a minor, inconsequential planet now recognized its capability and resilience. The Galactic Council was fractured, its remaining members scrambling to secure alliances and rebuild shattered defenses. The message was clear. Earth would not be ignored or oppressed. Any threat to its people would be met with unrelenting force. One by one, leaders from allied planets and distant colonies began to send emissaries, extending formal acknowledgments of humanity's strength and resilience. Some even offered alliances, recognizing that Earth had emerged as a power that could no longer be dismissed or underestimated. The galaxy had entered a new era, one where humanity's voice could no longer be ignored. Meanwhile, within the walls of Earth's military command, Marshall met with his trusted officers, Colonel James Turner, Major Eric Draven, and Admiral Leon Blackwell. They gathered in a private room, reflecting on the mission they had carried out together. Each man bore the weight of what they had seen, yet they understood that their actions had not only avenged a young boy, but had also ensured the safety of future generations. Colonel Turner, ever Marshall's loyal confidant, broke the silence. "The galaxy finally understands who we are. We've secured peace, for now at least. And it's all thanks to you, sir." Marshall gave a humble nod. "It's thanks to all of us. Every man who fought, every ship that engaged, every soul who refused to yield. We did this together." The silence that followed held a quiet pride. They had faced overwhelming odds, defied an empire, and emerged not just as victors, but as defenders of humanity. For these men, the mission's success was more than a strategic triumph. It was a statement that Earth would not surrender to fear, nor bow to oppression. Across the galaxy, other worlds began to take note. In the fringes of Council space, rebel factions found hope in humanity's audacity, viewing Earth's triumph as proof that even the most oppressive empires could be challenged. Whispered tales spread of how humans had stood up to the powerful and unyielding, and had emerged victorious. They became symbols of defiance and resilience, their legacy inspiring those who had lost faith in their own strength. But for General Marshall, this newfound recognition was bittersweet. The memory of his son lingered, a reminder of what had been sacrificed to reach this moment. As he looked out over the horizon, he felt the weight of his mission shift. His son's life had been cruelly taken, yet in his memory, Marshall had reshaped the galaxy. In the days that followed, Earth began fortifying its defenses, determined to secure this newfound place in the cosmos. Diplomatic ties were established with former rivals, and strategic alliances began to emerge. Humanity was no longer isolated, no longer a solitary planet in a vast galaxy. They were part of something larger now, respected and even feared. As a formal ceremony to honor the fallen commenced, the names of those who had given their lives echoed through the assembly, a solemn reminder of the cost of victory. When Marshal Sun's name was called, the crowd fell silent, offering a collective moment of reverence. Marshall stood tall, pride mingling with sorrow, knowing that Ethan's legacy would live on in every life now safe from the Council's tyranny. The ceremony ended with a final salute, a pledge that Earth would continue to protect its people and its allies with unwavering resolve. As the sun set on the assembly, Marshall felt a new chapter beginning, not only for himself but for all of humanity. They had proved their strength, not merely with fire and fury, but with a resolve that went beyond revenge, to safeguard what they held dear. When the galaxy looked upon Earth, they no longer saw a backwater planet. They saw a force that would protect its own, a people willing to challenge the galaxy's greatest powers if pushed too far. The Council's broken empire was now a stark warning, a monument to humanity's relentless strength. And in that moment, General Anthony Marshall knew that they had achieved more than retribution. They had forged a future where humanity stood among the stars, respected, secure, and united in memory of the innocent lives they would never forget.